Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the 40k Fireside podcast. I'm David Gaylard, and I'm joined by my good friend Vijay. Together, we discuss 40k and the meta from our perspective, along with events we've recently been to and those that have got coming up. So come on down to the Fireside and listen.
And welcome back to episode 33 of 40k Fireside. Vic, that's me. I just did third person myself there. Vic is back.
Wow.
And
Who is this guy?
I am so excited to be back because it's been a while since I've recorded. Dave has done a couple of really awesome episodes. He did one with Typhus from Team Poland and also with Liam Hackett, two extremely talented players and some very insightful interviews. So check out the previous two episodes. But this episode is going to be me and Dave going through more about WTC, but going through our thoughts, our goals, our preparation for our first WTC. We are both novices, beginners. We're not experienced in this at all, but I feel like I know I've definitely learned a lot during this process, and I'm sure you have as well, right, Dave?
Yeah, but before I want to get to that, I think that I was reflecting sort of on what we were going to talk about today, and after doing the last couple of episodes, I felt like we're getting back to a little bit of the core of what we originally started the podcast for, right? Which was to show our side of the story as, and kind of archive our journey as 40k players, right? So it feels a little bit, if I'm being, honest, and try to be honest with the audience, it feels a little bit more in the comfort zone when it's just us two chatting about this is what, we experience and this is what we struggled with or enjoyed or something like that, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, I know that tier lists, everyone loves a tier list. Everyone loves a rant, like discussion about the flaws of something overpowered or a poor rule set. But, our very first few episodes, like you just said, were us just talking about our journey. And it's going to be a little bit of that. And, a priority for us was not just to talk about ourselves, but also give back to the listener some insights that we pick up with our practice, with our experiences in 40k. So let's try our best to do that during this episode.
Sounds good.
So we've got a little bit of like a list of topics that we wanted to touch on. I think a big part of it is going to be our preparation. Me and Dave are primarily singles players. We've played quite intensively in the world singles meta and particularly within the UK. But teams and especially international team events at this caliber is a completely different beast. And we're going to go through the different ways that we prepared, because I think we had very different approaches to our openness to discuss with other teams and the type of preparation we did.
I think we're going to come to two. This episode is probably going to contrast more than anything because your preparation is probably on one end of the spectrum and my preparation's on the other end of the spectrum. So, and then your philosophies and my philosophies probably are a lot different. I feel like, for some context, I feel so for some more context, because it's probably important to kind of set the scene, right? So, we have our Team Ignite WhatsApp group where that's the primary wheelhouse where during the single season, we're all together collaborating as a team, much like, a national team for WTC, talking about singles list, tournaments, other players that are attending, everything like that. So that's like our bread and butter, right? That's our normal comfort zone. So for the last month, that's obviously been a rather interesting environment because it's not as if we're not all going to leave the team chat, but at the same time we have 5 WTC players, what would have been 6 and could be 7 at some day, on the team, right? And a lot of these teams are either directly collaborating with one another, so Iceland and Scotland, for example, or a team is first WTC, Team New Zealand, or an established team, C2 team, Team Belgium, or who's a bit more collaborative, or Team England, who from my perspective, and I think I'm going to classify myself as the outsider here, because I haven't been involved in the heavy collaboration, or I haven't gone to the meetups in Poland, but I also at the same time my team preparation hasn't been anywhere near as intense as I suspect Team England's was. So I feel like I've just been a bit of a fly on the wall for the past month. I've just been working with some people on our team, but Vic has been very absent, and that's kind of been the Team England policy. So that's just the backdrop to everything. So what you guys are hearing is actually the first time Vic and I have chatted I mean, about 40K in all seriousness, right? For a month, right?
Since our Birmingham teams almost.
Which is
It's
which is the first time
yeah,
this has ever happened for us as well, right? And as a team, I think.
yeah.
So
And I think this is going to be a great opportunity to share the reasons for why certain approaches were taken for things. And I hope that people find this quite interesting, because a little bit of insight into Team England is probably something that people want.
yeah,
Let it be competitors or just people who are interested in the WTC or just want to know more about
yeah.
40K.
And disclaimer: we've got Josh Roberts' tick of approval for this one. So everything. I'm sorry. I'm going to have to throw some jabs. I mean, come on.
I actually don't, so I'm going to try and not give too much away. But we're at the stage now where lists have been released for WTC.
Yeah.
People know what compositions, what ideas have been put out there. It's a fascinating psychological exercise in itself. But now I'm way more open to be able to talk about things. So I'm really excited to analyze with you.
And I'm
kind of a
not
bit more
invested
about it.
in anyone's outcome, believe it or not. I don't want this team to win, or in all seriousness, I don't want this team to win, or I don't want that team to win. I don't really care if this team wins or that team wins. In all seriousness, I just I only really care about my own team and our goals, which we're going to talk about later. So when I'm asking some questions, I'm genuinely just trying to figure stuff out, because feel like I've been going solo a little bit recently. I've been sort of trying to figure out this whole system sort of by myself. And we had Typhus and we had Liam Hacken. I've been listening to all the Contact Lost episodes, and I've been trying to understand the way that a lot of the great people in the WTC think. So perhaps I've been the investigative journalist to some extent, and you're the test subject in this one.
Well, how about this, Dave? Why don't we kick it to a bit of jazz music and then start off the episode talking about our preparation? I'll do a little monologue for a bit,
Sure.
just to share some thoughts.
See you in some jazz music.
And we are back. So here we go. So I want to give a little bit of background about this, because this whole preparation phase for Team England for WTC comes off the back of a few things. Some for the team. One of them is what you discussed with Typhus. Team England didn't do as well as expected last year. And I think they highlighted a number of things that they did wrong in the preparation phase, which arguably, more than almost anything, it feels like more than singles, preparation is absolutely critical to success in teams. And preparation limits whatever kind of skill advantage players have. And almost to the point where skill advantage becomes a very small factor relative to how much people have prepared in the background. And that's something that Team England slipped on a little bit last year. They admit that themselves. They had done matrices really late. They hadn't got all their lists together, etc., etc. And it resulted in a situation where they underperformed, and it left a bad feeling. Now, Typhus was very right to analyze that because of that. I think teams like Team England and Team USA, as was mentioned, are probably going to come into this year really trying to correct those mistakes. That was one thing which took me back a little bit, because it was really intense, this preparation phase. And it's kind of interesting because we're both singles players, and the people that are on Team England are the people that we directly compete with in super major events to try and actually win the event. So except for me and you, Dave, within our team, we collaborate so much, but I don't collaborate with these people. I almost keep information away from them so that they don't gain an advantage on me. Now, everything is turned around, and I'm collaborating with people who I often haven't collaborated
I believe
with.
that's called conspiring with the enemy, but that's right. Carry on.
And you guys became the enemy.
Yeah, true.
So
No, it's true. Look, we're not going to hide any BS. It was a bit adversarial at some points. There were some words said, and I said some stuff at some point that I probably should have thought out a little bit better. And I didn't appreciate the fact that maybe there was people were undergoing a lot of are in a lot of pressure and stuff like that. And I don't know. I don't really know what I'm talking about anyway. So that was the context of that. But there was some, which is good, obviously, because the only reason why there is that adversarial nature is because it, you believe that people on our team were obviously genuine competitors at the same time, though, right?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, it's in a way, it's a sign of respect there. And we're going in as a seed one team here, and this is a very unique situation of going into WTC, I feel, because we're going in with indexes on the start of a completely new edition. And if you know anything about the English meta, it's that if there is a broken unit, it will be spammed by so much of the UK meta, as we saw with Desolation Marines. No one was talking about it online. First UK Super Major, not even a week after actual release of the models, and 9 out of 10 of the top players in attendance had multiple units of Desolation Marines. So that is testament to the way that UK players have trained themselves to prepare for singles events. And I think going into it, at least me, and no one else said this out loud except for me, was I think one of our great strengths is our ability to analyze information, find the strongest combinations, and actually list build. We may not necessarily be the strongest players in terms of player skill or even the quantity of reps we have, but we certainly have some level of skill in list building.
Interesting.
And there was probably an option of us collaborating with some of the teams which weren't in Seed 1. But only if those teams were not collaborating with other teams in Seed 1. So let's say that one of the teams was collaborating with Team Poland. We couldn't then collaborate with that team because no matter what, as you discuss ideas and things, it does tend to filter through to the wider community. And we thought potentially we'll lose an advantage on small tech pieces, balanced with the risk of missing on knowledge that's gained from collaborative research. So it was a very interesting thing. But I think generally the Seed 1 teams haven't collaborated outside of Poland. Potentially, I don't think USA did. I don't think Germany did.
I don't believe Australia did either.
Or Australia did. So amongst the Seed 1 teams, it's not that weird to kind of keep your ideas to yourself, and you see that in some of these lists that have been released. The teams which have collaborated have a lot of like similar kind of ideas. And then you have some teams like Australia, UK, Germany, who've come up with different ideas to those teams,
Spain.
but each individual ideas.
That's true, yes. Yeah, Spain in there as well, of course.
I'm saying from the Seed 1, because Spain is a Seed 2 in that one. And in our pod as well, which is quite interesting. So that's how we went about it. And we kind of did a very similar approach to what we did with Ignite, which I found really interesting because, you make a big matrix of all the different factions and you try and fill in the blanks with your practice. And then as you kind of fill in the blanks in this, like, this is how well this faction does against that faction, and you build up all the squares, you can see, okay, these factions actually are doing the best. And when we did it with Team Ignite, we were going through many iterations of it where we found, okay, look, actually, you know what, Yoko, does this matchup actually go like this? Maybe we should test it again with a different player on it. And you get a wildly different result. You discuss further and keep doing that. That phase was so incredibly challenging because about 6 of the factions chose themselves. And we were struggling for the last 2 factions, which I think is normal, right, Dave? Did you find that as well?
I'll just let you carry on. I'll let you carry on. I'm running.
Yeah, because maybe it's a completely different situation for us. So we have access to every single faction. There's no limitation. Every player will play everything. Faction specialists were disregarded in our particular kind of approach. So, I play Eldari a lot, but I'm not playing Eldari. I'm playing Thousand Suns at this event. And Manny's playing Eldari. And you could argue that I've played hundreds of games more of Eldari than Manny in my time. But still, we're all versatile singles players, and we are able to kind of be on what's needed for the team. So we went through a long process, found like the first 6 factions, struggled with the last 2, and then went back, and some of our first 6 were no longer kind of correct anymore. And we had to adjust some of those. It's a very complex process to get down to the final 8. And even as we were coming towards the list deadline, we were still picking the last faction
Right.
in
Mhm.
there. And in order to get the correct choice there, I was really impressed with how many reps the team was putting in and how they were collaborating both between the playing and the non-playing players. We have 7 coaches on Team England, so I think
You've got
7.
just as many coaches as my team players. Okay.
We have a lot, including a non-playing captain and a playing captain. So we have a huge amount of support staff, and the coaches are not like people who don't play 40k. These
Right, yeah.
are
They're
kind
not
of
life
people
coaches.
who these are people we have access to those in the UK, but not in this case. People who kind of can go 4-1 at events and even win GTs and things like that. So, and also people who have been ETC winners in the past. So yeah, we have great support base to also play factions in the Matrix. So we ended up on our lists after the preparation phase based on all of those reps within our 16 players playing against each other over and over again in different combinations of players playing different things. And I'm pretty happy overall with how it all ended. There was one last point I'll make before I let you talk, Dave. There was one thing which really struck me, which is changing my mindset from winning or losing a game to allowing the team to win the game. And I think in teams, even if you lost all of your games, if you've blunted someone else from scoring as many points as they expected on their matrix, or you removed a faction from the matrix that, or from the pairings that is good into the rest of your team, that is such a huge win for your team. And yeah, so that was a really interesting thing that I think some people on our team just naturally understand how that fits into a team's meta compared to a singles meta.
I will be very brief because my team preparation was nowhere near this expansive. Well, my team, our team, I think I should say. So we have the difficulties of myself being in the UK. It was pros and cons to it, obviously, right? Myself being in the UK across the other side of the world, and then 7 people that I've never met before in New Zealand. And so I kind of thought, what is the best way that I could just help the team, right? Because I still need to practice and figure stuff out. And I just thought, look, I can provide a lot of connectivity between what I'm hearing over here and what and I can feed that back to the guys in my team, right? So that was a big focus for me. And I also, because I had a bit of experience with teams, I wanted to make sure that we were dialing in, kind of hitting our milestones, so to speak, right? So just for us briefly, about 2 weeks out of list. So when about a month out from this submission, we made an Excel spreadsheet, and that said, what are you interested in faction wise? And then we kind of said who wants to be maybe like pushers or defenders or text pieces or something like that. And we had a big thing come up, and then it was a 2-week period of just investigating and playing games. We're always chatting, oh, how are you finding this and that? And then based on kind of what was happening over here and our testing internally, I kind of said, look, we need to, at 2 weeks from the deadline submission, we need to lock in our factions. So this is a lot different from you guys, obviously. And there's a couple of reasons for that. One of the reasons being that, we don't have the availability of preparation as much as a top team like Team England does, of course. We don't have the model availability. My guys are also flying out, so we need to get as much practice in as possible. And, obviously fair to say that they haven't won as many tournaments. There's not as accomplished singles players, for example, right? So expecting them to pick up brand new factions and do everything like that and be able to perform as well as if they compared to if they were on a regular faction that they were used to, just wasn't, it's never going to be feasible. So we locked in our stuff in about 2 weeks beforehand. We had one little one that was Tyranids, so it was a bit of a question mark there. We were either going to play Tyranids or something else, depending on if the Spore Mines got nerfed. So we just had a slot in for that one. And then, the next 2 weeks was just iterating upon lists and whatnot like that. I was working with Chris Radford from our team. I was working with kind of Yoko and Brian from our team as well, talking about lists and stuff like, oh, do you think this is good? What do you think about this sort of thing? Like, oh, we're kind of looking at something like this. And there was an Aldari list that I helped, push over the line a little bit. And Chris helped me with my Death Watch list, which was awesome. And then my testing with Necrons helped with our team, and then you'll see that the Eldari list that we're playing is exactly the same as Scotland's Eldari list, for example. And
Yeah, very powerful
yeah, and the
list.
GSC list is really similar because that's kind of obviously
Nice.
Yockel's list that I fed for and stuff. So that was the majority of our preparation, and we've got we're doing the matrices. So I'm sitting down with one of our teammates tonight to do pairing simulations. So we're just kind of starting on that, and that was kind of our preparation. But what I wanted to transition this into is something interesting that I've noticed, and I guess I truly do mean it when I feel like I've just been a bit of an outside observer because I've actually just spent a lot of time talking to other team captains and whatnot like that, and because I think they just
Mm.
respect the fact that I'm like genuinely want to do well for my team. Like I'll offer them, I say, hey, any advice you want on my takes on anything, I'm more than happy to provide it. But I just
Mhm.
want to know what your thoughts are on like what should we be focusing on and stuff like that. So I've been getting like a lot of information there, and so in that sense, I feel like I'm a little bit like step back from everything a little bit. Obviously, because our expectations are not anywhere near as high as a team like Team England, for obvious reasons. And one common theme that I saw, and this really hit home when I actually spoke to Liam this morning,
Mm.
was that there are some teams in the WTC now that have bizarre lists, like whack, crazy, right? Like
Yeah.
if, for example, a year ago, if you told me and like looked at these lists from a singles player's perspective, I would be like, these lists are garbage. Like, what are
Mm.
you doing? And that's because I would just transpose my singles playing experience onto them. And after talking with a couple of people, what I quickly realized is that lists that look crazy at this level only look crazy because you don't understand what's going on. And
Absolutely. Nailed it.
the reason, and actually, the teams, I think, I've got a little hypothesis. I think the teams that have the wackiest lists may be the best pairing teams in the world, perhaps. And that's because when you understand the matrix at a level of these are the common pairings that are happening within the matrix, you can then create skews that happen based on those common pairing matrices. And I think two teams that really have exemplified that for me were Spain and Australia, and then potentially United States as well. I think it's pretty
Mm.
clear that those three are the standouts in terms of their list diversity. I think everyone else has got the pretty they've got, whereas one team might have one unorthodox list, these guys have four unorthodox lists, right? Or four skews, for example. So I'm really interested to see how those teams perform, simply because their preparation, they've come to just completely different conclusions, haven't they?
Mhm.
And I don't have any idea of how it's going to go because these people are much better than myself. So it's a clashing of the minds, really, in some sense, I think.
Well, absolutely. And the thing is, all these teams would have spent hours and hours coming up to the final decisions that they did come
Mm,
to with collaboration amongst the best minds in 40K in their
mhm,
country. And then think about that moment when they open up the lists of other armies.
mm,
Like, let's even take Eldari,
mhm.
for example. And, some teams have two Wraith Knights, some teams have 20 Wraith
Yep.
Guard. When the teams with two Wraith Knights open the lists with 20 Wraith Guard and only see one Wraith Knight, they'll be like, wow, our preparation was perfect, and they missed that. And the teams with 20 Wraith Guard will open up the two Wraith Knight lists and be like, wow, our preparation was so good. They missed
Yep.
that, and they've got the extra Wraith Knight
Mhm.
instead. And the thing is, you have so much invested in the choices that you made that you can get blindsided if you immediately think anyone who hasn't gone for the same choices has made a
Yes.
mistake. And I think that can lead to overconfidence. And I looked in a little bit deeper to a few lists which I thought on initial read was suboptimal.
Okay. Example.
And I'll give you an example. Team Poland Duda's Eldar
Okay.
list. I looked at it and thought, okay, there's one Wraith Knight and one Brick of 10 Wraith
Yep.
Guard. And then there's like Fugan in there. Why does the Autarch have a Phoenix
Mm.
gem? The Yin Khan is there, sure. But there's only like one unit of Warp Spiders and one unit of Shadow Spectres, something. It just looked like there was nothing in the
Yeah.
list. And then as you delve in deeper, you read Fugan's data sheet. He's the Fire Dragon Phoenix
Mhm.
Lord. He can get back up on a 2
Yeah.
plus. The Phoenix Gem lets a unit get back up on a 2 plus when it
Yeah.
dies. And then the Yin Khan teleports to the position where these guys die before they get back up. There's so many like oppressive tricks in that list. and the sequencing and the flow of the way it would play on the board is fantastic and it's brilliant, and it's a lot of stuff that most other teams have
Hmm.
missed. So yeah, I mean, don't judge a book by its cover when it comes to these lists, and reading them is probably my takeaway.
But 180 Tyranid Bodies by Brodie Middleton, which is probably
Is that
Eric Lathuri's list, I take it. Actually, no, it's been confirmed that Brodie actually genuinely started enjoying playing Tyranids, so it's quite funny.
now that does bring up another point. Just because everyone's different and has practiced and come up to unique ideas does not necessarily mean either that everyone is like you're wrong, but it also doesn't mean that everyone is correct here.
Mhm.
And there is bound to be winners and losers in terms of design choices.
Well, correctness is a spectrum in and of itself, right? Really, it's not a binary win or lose. You were correct, you weren't correct, of course, right?
Absolutely, but there is a possible I think there are many things which sit within the window of being optimal and like having fitting in, and there are also a number of things which may be suboptimal. They would be outright better if there was something else. And those are going to be the interesting things which I hope we identify. And I think it's going to be very hard to identify before WTC happens. So yeah, exciting.
It's the kind of thing you can theorize about for a very long time, isn't it? But at the end of the day, you're just going to have to go, okay, who's thing? So one topic that's come up a lot of times, and I've made it a point to ask the guests that I've had on and the people that I've talked to, is this question that I've been trying to unravel, try to understand, which is the best team? Is it a team of champions or is it a championship team? And what I mean by that is that you can have a fantastic team on paper, and you alluded to this earlier as well, or is it the team that works together the best? Is it the team that has the best preparation? Is it which is it? Is it the team of champions or the championship team, which ultimately is the stronger formula for success here?
Oh, it's an interesting question because, like when you break it all the way down, the end product of what's happening is it's 8 singles matches going on,
Is it?
basically. Not really, not a win-loss-draw singles match, but like a 20-0, you're trying to get as many battle points as you
You're
can.
still playing
kind of
Warhammer,
singles
aren't you?
match. He's still playing Warhammer, and at that level, like that last level, player skill is key. Player skill gets you 2 or 3 points that you shouldn't have got. Player skill gets you a 20-0 versus getting a 12-8 win. But as you go further and further up and look at the higher levels of this, there's a few people who would have motivated the team when they're down, brought them back up. And I know Anthony was talking about this in his Contact Lost podcast episode, where he was saying, USA were down a bit, and Sean Naden brought them all back up and let them carry on playing the game.
Nice.
That's another level. And then you've got people who are good at looking at the entire team's picture, and you fall under this characteristic, Dave. These people are brilliant because they're able to do the pairings in a way that actually makes sense. If you tried to get me to do the pairings, it would take a year for Dave to teach me to do it anywhere like what he does.
It's news to me, but yeah.
It comes naturally to some people. You need those people. And then going a level further is the single key thing of all of this, which is your overall preparation. And that overshadows all other factors here. Your ability to work together with your team, to understand your lists and build a set of lists that work together and suit the players that are playing them is incredibly powerful, and only comes with hours and hours of practice if you're trying to aim at the highest levels of success of this tournament.
Now, I'm going to speak for the Polish people who are probably yelling at their screen saying, there's no way player skill turns a 12-8 to a 20-0. But yeah, I do take your point. It certainly helps in the scrapping. And I think one thing that I've learned to appreciate over the time period here is that the player skill difference is a lot smaller than I would have anticipated. And actually, the amounts of preparation is the one thing that decreases the impact of player skill at a table, because you can have someone who's naturally talented and might turn up and they've only played, they haven't played against all the armies and all the boards and all that stuff, right? And they might do very well. But you could also have a player who's maybe a lot more dedicated and isn't maybe as naturally as gifted, prepare 5 times as much, and all of a sudden, because they've seen the scenario once or twice before already, then they're already, then the player skill difference is very, minutiae at that point anyway, isn't it? Because
Mhm.
they're actually operating at that level, irrespective of that.
Yeah, absolutely. And there's also a big factor here in that in teams, because you're aiming for points rather than for a win or a loss. It's completely different when you play against someone who's just trying to scrape for
Mm.
points, who accepts that they've lost the game. That doesn't really happen too much in
Mm-hmm.
singles. Like it'll go to probably like round 3 or 4 in the game before you're like, look, I know I've lost this game, but I'm going to try and get as many points as I can so I get good
Mm-hmm.
ranking. Whereas in teams, you go into the game like, I know I've lost this game, but I'm going to make it hell for you to try and get any points off
Yeah.
me. And when you get a good player doing that, oh my God.
And players naturally gravitate in the team format to different roles in a certain sense, don't they? So I think that, if you look at Team England, Manny Chima on Aldari, he is a single, I don't want to briefcase him, but he's probably a pusher if anyone was to say that, maybe, right? So perhaps pushing on Aldari is the best thing, is something that suits his or his play style or his mindset, so to speak, because it is a bit of a mindset I think you have to adopt, right? You're not in the mindset of winning a game; you're in the mindset of crushing your opponent as much as possible, which is a different way of. I think you have to be able to adopt that mindset, which is a bit of a skill in and of itself, isn't it?
Yeah, one of the Enter the Matrix episodes that Typhus did with
Mm-hmm.
Nathan on roles within a
Mm-hmm.
team.
Yep.
And I think one of the points they discuss there is there's a lot of benefits to putting your strongest player on the strongest army in your
Yep.
team. I don't know how much I subscribe to that. I think there's a lot of argument to be had, but these are people who are much more experienced, so they know what they're talking
Mm.
about. And Manny fits into that category. He's probably the like technically strongest player in our
Mm-hmm.
roster. So he gets the strongest army because he will be able to be more consistent.
Mm.
And the results of that army, like I think it's actually extremely hard to play for high points differentials. It's a very highly skilled thing. It might seem like you have to be so techie to try and scrap for points and keep a close draw or something, but actually it's an incredible skill to be able to push for a high point score. So yeah, I think there's a lot of benefit to having your strongest player on the strongest list.
I think some people, and this touches on this point, some teams, in my experience, also don't subscribe to the uh, to the philosophy, perhaps here that you've displayed in Team England, which is that there is no such thing as a faction specialist, right?
Mhm.
That obviously was not true for Australia last year. Most definitely, Eric playing GSC is the classic example, right? Like the guy's played 200 points for like years.
Mhm.
So
Yep.
that's the opposite side of the coin, right? Is that lots of teams have different ideas around, okay, well, if this person's very good at that, even if that's the pusher faction, they could learn the pusher role as opposed to learning the faction, for example.
Yeah, I think there are role specialists though. I think is how I would look at teams.
Hmm.
There are like not maybe roles or archetype specialists. Like you could take Nassim for example. There was a very good chance Nassim during our preparation would have been on a melee non-shooting board control army.
Sure.
Right? Have you ever seen Nassim play an army like that ever in his singles experience?
No.
Never. He's always played deep striking, fast moving, shooty
Hmm.
armies. It was much more fit for him to be on, say, Tau or Death Watch, something like that. Even Eldari, you
Hmm.
know, even though he's never played Eldari before, that role and that particular archetype is something he has a lot of experience with.
Hmm.
So I think that's one way of widening the possible factions that players in your team can
Hmm.
play.
And I think there's a lot of benefit to playing a lot of factions and testing a lot of factions, right? Like
Mhm.
you understand the game a lot more comprehensively. I know that in tournaments I've played, the difference between when I feel comfortable and when I don't feel comfortable has oftentimes just been the difference in whether I've won it or not. I've been like, oh, I sort of know how this army works. Like, I'm gonna have to okay, fly it by the seat of my pants. Versus like, oh yeah, I know that strat. I know that like these guys move these far. I got my rules set.
Oh,
Whatever,
definitely.
right?
The biggest jump you can do against a new faction that you never played against is the difference between the first time you play it and the second time you
Yeah,
play
of
it.
course.
Yeah.
GSC, everyone's been there.
Oh yeah, loads of stuff. I mean, I played Tyranids for the first
What?
time the other day.
Wait, you played with
Um,
them?
no,
Oh,
against them. And like I just completely had no idea like what their rules were. I was just like, don't tell me anything, let's just go. And now that I replay it, just thinking of how many different things and how much better my understanding of the matchup is incredible. So I think try like my biggest thing with this preparation is trying to get one game into every faction that we're likely to see, at
yeah.
least. If not more on the ones I think I'm more likely to play
Mm.
against.
So that's kind of, I guess, that kind of covers the preparation phase. Out of 10, how would you say the preparation was, if you had to be honest?
Um, I would say it was 10 out of 10 in terms of it was completely eye opening for me. And in terms of player development, player skill development, I had started stagnating a little bit in terms of improving as a player. And I think this has been like a little spike up
Mhm.
in my personal player
Nice.
skill. So, in terms of that, 10 out of 10. In terms of how well prepared we are for the tournament, I don't know, maybe like a 7 or an 8. Like we gave it a really good shot. We absolutely could always do more.
Mhm.
And whether or not we have the optimal factions, it's hard to tell.
Mm.
Whether we have the optimal list design choices, I'm not entirely sure on either of those points. But I think we're in a position where we can give it a damn good shot.
Yeah. Well, props to you for being honest. Of course, it's not easy. I think, it's. I think one thing that's been, I mean, one thing that's been eye opening for me is the amount of work that some of these teams are putting in. It's just crazy. It's on another level.
Yeah,
I
it's
wonder about how good
serious.
of a singles player I could be if I put in as much effort.
Oh, can you imagine? Like we're going to tournaments with like 2 practice games a lot of the time, right?
Yeah. But at the same time, we're also playing like lists that came out a week afterwards. So it's a lot different, right? It's a lot different environment. But
The pressure is high though. In singles, if you lose a game, well, fine, you lost it. Yeah, you tried your best, whatever. In teams, you just can't let your whole team down. Like you can't be the person
interesting.
who in my opinion, I can't be the person who got a 317
Yeah.
when it should have been a draw.
Yeah.
And that's what tipped us from a draw into a loss.
That's
Like,
yeah.
that's a pressure in itself. And I think that pushes you to prepare more and more. You don't want to get caught out.
Yeah, that's interesting. That's okay, interesting. I think that I've perhaps wrongly, I've been kind of I've had this phrase in my mind, shared pressure, shared glory, if you know what I mean. Like
Mhm.
if the
Mhm.
pressure is divided among everyone, so is the glory. And the singles is the antithesis of that in every regard, isn't it? Really, it's soul pressure, soul glory. It's a
That's
bit like
it.
Highlander, isn't it? It's. I mean, I don't fully subscribe to that, but that's kind of
Yep.
was one thing when I thought about teams. Right, well, way back, I was like, wow, you kind of win together. It's like, wow, but singles, you win by yourself. You get all the glory.
More glory.
But yeah, I do take your point. Yeah, there's because obviously you're a part of a social structure that is, the team social structure has a pressure cooker, is a pressure cooker in and of itself, right? Because you are socially around the same people all of the time as well, right? And you're not just invested in your own success, but the success of the team, which is a higher, higher calling, for lack of better words, in that sense, right?
Yeah, absolutely, dude.
Um,
I mean, that was a deep chat. That was interesting.
good. Well, I think for New Zealand,
Hmm.
should we go on to goals, which I think is interesting.
Yeah.
I'll go.
Okay. What's the
I'll
goal,
go
man? What are you
first.
planning
I'll
on?
go first. You
Yeah.
know what my goal is here? My
Hmm.
goal for Team New Zealand is to generate enough enthusiasm to get another team back next year. I think that's
Mhm.
I think if we accomplish that, I'll be more than happy because that's the start of something really really fun and really positive, right? We're just on the beginning of our journey in a lot of ways, and in a lot of ways, it doesn't really matter how we do, right? Just the fact that we've got 8. I'm really proud of the fact that we've got 8 New Zealanders playing. A lot of teams have 3 mercenaries, and or countries that are a lot closer or a lot bigger than New Zealand, right?
Hmm.
Have 3 mercenaries or 4 mercenaries, something like that. And a part of me sort of thinks, well, like, is that real? Like, does that kind of defeat the purpose, right? Like, is that the point of WTC, to compete with people that are not from your nation, so to speak, right?
Hmm.
Because it's like it's not really representative of how your nation does, right? How good your nation is. Um, because well, obviously those people went from your nation. So I'm really proud of that, and it's New Zealand is the furthest traveling country out of any country to date. So it's
That's
a big
awesome.
effort to get people across, and so if we can replicate even something of that amount of effort next year, then I think it'll be a big win. But having said that, though, I think our lists are pretty good. I think
Yeah.
they're indicative of someone who's had the oversight of a singles orientated view, which is obviously
Yes.
myself. And because I wanted to have the premise, I chatted with the guys before, and as I posted this message like a month ago back, and I said, look, the bare minimum that we need is we're not going to be playing any lists that can get 20 owed. Like we're not. We
Mm.
all want to play high floor lists because I want to make even the rounds where we have got statistically no chance. I want to make them as competitive as possible. And sometimes if you've just got three people that are getting stomped, it's like it's very easy to bring the morale down like that. It's like, well, why even try at that point? And it's very difficult to benchmark how well you've actually done if you've just gotten kind of cakewalked a little bit. So try and
Mhm.
make the games as competitive as possible. And the best way of doing that is, in the list building phase, make sure you've got the right tools for the job. And if you haven't got the right tools for the job, then it's going to be an uphill struggle from there, right? So
Absolutely.
that's where I think it's very clear that we don't have anywhere near the levels of complexity, or we don't have five people doing pairings for us to know that our knights will probably be the seventh or eighth pairing when most people have these factions out already, for example, right? Which is the level that all these guys go to, but they do it for seven, 5 out of 8 of their factions are built like that, which is crazy
Mm.
because the level of knowledge that requires is huge. So, good lists, have a good time. We've got a funny pod, but I think I think we could maybe scrap. I think we could probably get into the middle of seed 3. I think maybe
Who have you got in your pod?
who have we got in our pod?
Yeah.
Alrighty, we got the spicy one, mate. We've got we've got Team Australia round 1,
Oh my
which is
god.
the
What are the chances?
well 1 in 9, which are the reigning champions from last year. They won the sporting, the singles, and the overall. And because I was chatting with Liam beforehand, before we chatted this morning, and I said, is there anything want to talk about? And I said, between us, mate, like, this, you guys are obviously a much better Warhammer nation than us. Of course, no one would ever deny that. And I said, I would be really. I told Liam, I said, I'd be really happy if you could, after the game, just walk us through. Hey, maybe you guys could improve on this. Think about this. Like, oh, when we looked at your lists, we kind of saw these areas. Like, make sure you try and work on that. And I think we're in a lot of ways actually we're really lucky because New Zealand and Australia have a kind of brotherhood, so to speak. Like a big brother, little brother thing, where any other team that we drew in the world, with all due respect, like Team England, I don't think would give us the brotherly hard feedback of like, oh, do this and do that, and actually really be in
Mm.
our corner of like, hey, how are you guys doing? Like, oh, oh, how did that thing go? Or for example, because I think that there would be a team that out of any of the seed ones would genuinely want us to see us do better, right? So in a lot of
Mm.
ways, we're super lucky because A, they're really nice guys, and actually B, I've never played any of them before. But yeah, in a lot of ways, it's great. And then we've got Belgium, of course, which Liam Vissel and our team is a part of.
Oh
That
my
was a large,
goodness.
and then
That's a tough one. They're such a strong
for
team.
sure, and Alexander
Yeah.
Seiko in that team as well, and Guillaume,
Mm.
and then we've got Portugal. Now, I'm not going to shit talk Portugal at all, but I think we can beat Portugal.
Oh,
That's what I'm going for.
yeah. Hunt them down.
I think there was something said that New Zealand might be the more competitive, maybe the top of seed 4,
Yep.
and I think what we've got nothing to lose. We've got everything to gain, which is actually probably the best position to be into from a mental health perspective, isn't it? Like, I just get to go and have a
Lovely.
great weekend, but a lot of people have to stress out, and I can just sit back and look at everything, and it's a little bit of a different experience for me for once in my life. Anyway, that's my goals. What I guess maybe this would be. I know the answer to this already, but I'm going to say what I would have said otherwise.
Mm.
I think my interpretation of how Team England would set themselves is, it's win or nothing. Is that correct? Is that straight on the money, or is that like, there's pluses or minuses to that?
I think it's just like going to a singles event, Dave. You know where you go. You can't go in that I have to win this entire event.
Well, Yeah.
But what you can do is aim for something which is realistic and has a
Hmm.
window of success. And I think our window of success is try and hit the podium
Yep.
here. I think if we miss the podium, we will feel like, damn.
Hmm.
But if we don't get first and we get second, we'll be like, you know what? Good effort,
Yeah.
boys. So that would be it. I don't think it's win or nothing. It's like we have to do well. That's what we're aiming for. We're aiming to do
Yeah.
well.
Is there a yeah? It's interesting. I think it's always interesting when you. It's always I mean, I'm gonna yeah. I mean, maybe I should. It's always interesting when you set your goal as a placing or as a ranking, right? Isn't it? Because at the end of the
Mm.
day, there's still going to be things out of your control, and it can be sometimes detrimental to say, I want to come X or I want to come Y, right? I
Mm.
mean, that's something certainly that I've been dealing with over the years, because there are going to be things that are out of your control as well. So it's I think from a um, expectations perspective, or defining what success looks like too. It's also important to have those in less tangible things, right? Like did everyone put in their best effort? Like was the post
Mm.
mortem like we actually did everything we want to try, or we were happy with this or happy with that, which is
The
interesting.
problem with that in teams compared to singles. In singles, you could be the better player and still lose a
Hmm.
game, and that happens very often. Sometimes you need a bit of luck to actually win a big
Hmm.
event. With teams, you're spread out across 8 players, 8 games, with a huge number of
Hmm.
variables that are in your control before the games start.
Yeah.
And I think that's where things change. Because if you then go and analyze afterwards, it's not like singles where you'll pick up, oh, I made a slight movement mistake here. It'll be, this is wrong, this is wrong, all of these pairings are wrong because that was wrong.
Fuck! Throw it out all the windows. Fuck.
And sure, you got unlucky in this game, but we got lucky in that
Yeah.
game,
Yep.
and it evens out across 8 players. That's just what
That's what happened
happens.
to Birmingham.
So yeah, so that's a big factor here in terms of setting
Yeah,
goals as a ranking, I would
that's
say.
true.
And it's more kind of possible and potentially not as unhealthy as it would be in
Hmm.
singles to set a goal which is a ranking.
The architects of your own destiny. There's some saying like that, isn't it?
Yeah, something like that.
Yeah, and like I agree as well. Is that teams of my observations is that due to the total number of variables in games played, that there is much more in your control than singles, for example. Right? Like singles is like, well, I hit this one. Well, yeah, depends on David's
Yep,
price.
that happens.
Sorry. Yeah, which is can have dramatic effects as well. So I generally speaking, I do agree with you that there's much less luck in teams, which is
Mhm.
probably why we see the same common teams as I've been learning. Other kind of the big dogs in the world, right?
Oh yeah, I mean teams which focus on teams like
Yeah,
Poland, like
Australia as
yeah,
well.
they do.
They just only play
Yeah,
teams. It's just like okay.
yeah, yeah. So there's a reason why these guys are so good and why preparation actually makes a difference to outcome.
Mm.
So yeah, I mean, one thing I would say, Dave, and one thing I think you're in a very lucky position to be, because I think there was every chance you could have played for England, for
Sure.
example.
Yeah.
Because you're playing for New Zealand, I think you are going to be able to achieve a personal goal, which I really want to achieve, but I think will be more difficult for me because I'm on Team
Yeah.
England, which is to develop relationships with the international
Oh
community.
yeah.
Because there is no better event than this. This is a group of people who all share the same interests as you in competitive 40k from across the world, all competing in the same
Yeah.
thing, and the connections you are bound to build up in WTC, and I know I will as well, I know we both will, are going to be something that lasts with us throughout the time that we play the hobby.
True. And
So
on
yeah.
that point is a very good point. Is that a lot of my best friends now are people that I met through Warhammer, right? So
Hmm.
the complete end of that spectrum is you might meet someone who's a best friend for life, right, at WTC, which is a pretty
Hmm.
cool possibility when you think about it, right? Um,
Oh, for
which is
sure.
uh, which is really cool. Yeah. So yeah, I am excited about that. Although I was just talking, so I'm doing the singles, which is hopefully going to be 8 rounds. I'm doing the
Okay.
the main event, of course, 7 rounds. I'm doing the pairings. I'm doing the coaching. So I don't know how much
Oh,
time I
you're
got.
gonna be
There's
done,
only 5 figures of it. The drinking. When does that come in?
dude. We'll send one of our coaches over to you, man.
Oh my god! I would not say no. Yeah, I'm going to be like sub-coached by like Yoko or Brian or like and Anthony. I was like, hey, like just running into this thing. What are your thoughts on this? And they're going to be like, shut up, go away. We've got an important game. But yes, you're right. I'm very lucky. It's really cool to not have the pressure for once, which is nice. Of course, but I mean, it's always pressure. There's still people I want to beat and like that. I'm still worried, that this might be the first time a lot of European players have, seen me play, for example, or I don't know if this has crossed your mind, but what will people think when they see me play? Like, am I actually good? Because one other thing that's been really common in my realization is that, over here in the UK and the USA, and we both are, prime examples of this. We get a lot of coverage around, results and whatnot like that as well, right? So it's kind of like, are you actually good, right? It's like, well, I don't know. We get a lot of coverage, but that doesn't necessarily correlate to the fact that you're actually a good player. So it's kind of like I feel like I'm the very small fish in a huge pond, and
Yeah.
and I'm wondering in the back of my head, like, oh, when people see me play, they're going to be like, man, this guy was nowhere near as good as I thought he was going to be.
Yeah, this is going to be unique for us because we'll feel like we're top of the class. We're in set 1 of our class, our maths class, and then you go do maths at Oxford University, and you are not at the top of that class for sure. And that is how it's going to feel a little bit for us. I know it will be,
Exciting.
but that doesn't mean that we're going to do bad. I don't think. I think there are going to be players who are a little bit better than us, but I know for sure, Dave, we are both good enough to compete in this level, so we'll be fine.
Hope so. Should we take a little bit of a break and then let's move on to some listy McLists?
Oh yes.
We Vic and I are going to cut to some jazz while we work out the contract on this one. We'll be right back. All right, guys. Vic and I have been having a top secret chat over the break. It's been great. Okay, a little bit of disclaimer for this part. Vic's not really going to be chatting or going into depth about why they kind of picked some of their team lineups because I guarantee you that probably everyone at WTC is going to listen to this podcast. So guess what, losers? It's just Team New Zealand here from in and out. So unless you're Portugal, Belgium, or Australia, you can fuck off. Okay, all right. Okay.
Love it.
Yeah. Okay. Cool. So I think it would be really cool to get your critical take, Vic, on the list that we took.
Yeah.
Throwing you under the bus right here. Have you got best coast pairings open?
Yeah, I've got them all out. You guys are filthy meta chasers. Ooh. Look at this. This lineup is powerful, and I think you have gone for what can I say? The WTC meta lineup.
Yeah.
I think the only thing you're potentially missing is Thousand Suns out of the popular ones. But everything else is hot, and the lists also look hot, was my first take.
Nice.
I can see the benefits of collaboration in this situation.
We're definitely one of those people that have a lot to gain, so to speak, right?
Yeah, because like all of your players have optimized lists here. Like all of them are the strong lists in the setup, what you would consider the meta lists for these particular factions. I like it, man. I just looked at the CSM list for 12 obliterators, 2 Hellbrews. This is delicious with the Hellbrew. Oh,
that's a lot of shots.
2 Fortunes. Yeah, you'll go through, like, imagine you're playing Australia round 1.
Whoa.
They've got 2 Knight lists. You got that Chaos Spaceman with the Hellbrew teched in.
Liam already told me that I'm playing Knights, so.
Okay.
Liam was like, I'm not playing you, David. Brody is not playing you. You can play Knights. I was like, damn. But that's how it goes, really. Yeah, it's cool. So what are the factions that we've got that you haven't got? I believe there's a lot of overlap here, of course, but is it just Knights?
I think if you just swap Oh no, there's two differences in
Okay.
there. So if you Knights and
Oh,
Necrons
yes, of
are
course.
swapped to Thousand Suns and Imperial Guard
Cool.
for us, and then the rest are the
So what?
same.
I guess we won't talk about your list that you're taking, but these two
Mm.
lists. Did you play with Necrons and Imperial Knights? And because I guess the interesting point here is why didn't you guys take them without giving anything away or something like that, right?
Yeah.
I guess
Uh,
it's not really a big spoiler because you haven't taken
no,
them,
no,
right?
we haven't
But
got there.
clearly the ideas are divulging here, and the caveat here is that you know we are working with people who are maybe more comfortable on certain things as well, right? So there's is
Mhm.
every single team kind of at our level is also dealing with stuff like that. But I'll allow you to go on. What Imperial Knights? Alex Harrison actually played Imperial Knights at the last WTC. Not a fan of it this year.
He did. I mean, we had multiple players testing it,
Mm-hmm.
and coming up with conclusions on the correct type of list. Now, I don't know if you found this, but Imperial Knights seem scarier than they are when they shoot you.
Mm-hmm.
They kind of shoot you, and you're like, okay, is that it? And then um,
The
there's
Crusader shoots a lot. I'll give him that.
yes. So there are lots of guns, and I mean, in this case, you've gone for the three big
Yep.
knights and the three small
Mm-hmm.
knights, right? So the issue is at this level and what we're aiming to do, you want to avoid factions that can get locked out of a lot of points or take a big
Yeah.
loss. Now, I don't know if we've necessarily achieved that because you could argue that's a problem with the Imperial Guard
Mm-hmm.
list,
Yep.
right? But I would definitely say that's a problem with the knights. When you early in the game lose, let's say, a big knight and a couple of small knights, let's say you take that level of damage, which a lot of armies can
Yep.
do, you suddenly have like 4 units in your army. And you want to hold an objective, you want to do an action. You're suddenly missing a lot of cards that you're
Yeah.
drawing, and regardless of if you table your opponent, you're falling behind on pushing a differential of any
Yeah.
kind, and the game is just spiraling towards either a draw or, if your resources are dying too quickly, are spiraling towards a very bad
Yeah,
loss.
and I think one thing that Typhus said is that knights need a lot of babysitting in the pairings, so
Oh,
they kind of
definitely.
need the right things to go right. And look, yeah,
Mhm.
100% agree. What I would say though, there's a couple of pros to knights, which I kind of adopted. Was that one, if you're playing your first WTC, and you've got three big knights, and you're playing a lot of games, a lot of pressure, in Europe where you might be jet lagged, there's quite an advantage to playing an army that is somewhat direct, right? On the
Mm.
nose. And then second, which I think is just is in the same fashion, is that if as the days go by and maybe people have a few more drinks, they might forget about the fact that knights, for some reason, which I always freaking forget this upgrade, is that they have an enhancement. I don't know if you've ran into this one called the Mysterious Guardian, and
The one where they disappear and
yes,
come back.
and you know what? Mysterious Guardian on a knight that has a lot of shooting and towering is kind of easy to forget about. I mean, maybe I sound like an idiot, but it's like towering adds so much more difficulty to hide your freaking models, and it's like, well, I just deep strike like this, and I point my gun over, and then yeah, I can see you. It's like, well,
Yep.
okay, bugger. But I think that's the the two pros to them. And with Alex Taus has always played knights. He's played for a long time, so that's one that he's chosen to go for as well. And yeah, I think you are right though. Is that they kind of need some things to go the right way, and if the more you babysit a faction in the pairings, the worse your other pairings are going to be meeting optimal lineups, right? Like the lower chance that your GSC or your Aldari is going to meet the right lineup. So
Yeah, and it's not to say knights are bad. They are really vying for a spot in the top
mhm.
8. I think that's what we found anyway. We had knights all the way to
All
the
the way
end.
to the end.
Uh, it was the last faction that we changed on the day before
Yeah,
submission.
and then
Um,
Necrons as well, which is surprising because Christopher Kinnear played Necrons against us at Birmingham. He's been kind of, I guess, known as someone who plays a lot of Necrons, but
mhm.
Necrons not in the top 8, which to me is mind blowing. I think they're actually really powerful. I think they're a fifth or
Mm.
sixth maybe, and there's actually a lot of diversity in builds you can do for them. You've got Liam Hackett at one end, you've got Team Germany with 3 Transcendent Satans, you've got Team Poland has taken it as well. So yeah, was it just that? Was it more the fact that you guys didn't find someone that really locked into them, or was it just the fundamental power level?
I think in this situation where it's not clear exactly what the absolute best combination of factions
Mm.
is, um, I think in this situation, there's always going to be something which you're going to regret. Like you're going to feel like at this situation, oh, I wish I'd taken that, you
Mm.
know? And that could easily have been us. Let's say we took the Necrons and didn't take the Imperial
Yeah.
Guard. And I think, there is a chance that it might come back to bite us that we haven't taken
Not
Necrons.
to blow my
But
own horn either, but I was also practicing Necrons for singles as well. That's how good I thought they were in the team chat as
yes,
well.
yeah. But, everyone's practice will show different
Yeah.
things.
What?
And our decisions are based on our practice.
Yeah.
So I think it showed that the Necrons don't make the top
Yeah,
8.
and
So,
the reality is behind all these decisions that certain factions have certain roles as well, right? Which isn't
yeah.
necessarily linked to their fundamental ability to win a singles tournament, which is me transposing the Necron's singles ability into the teams, right?
Oh, yeah. I mean, let's say we had you in our team, in Team England.
Mm.
Um, Potentially the kind of insights and the research that you would have done into Necrons might have pushed them to be in the top 8. And this is actually a really interesting point about the meta, because actually I think this tournament is going to have a massive impact on the 10th edition meta,
Huge.
because there are so many things in these lists that you don't see in the singles list at the
Yeah.
moment. And the speed at which this information disseminates into the community is going to be hilarious. I think loads of the tech ideas and things are going to appear in other people's lists and singles
Yep.
tournaments, and within a few weeks, everyone will act like it's always been
Yeah.
there.
I think this is probably an unparalleled part of 40k, isn't it? Where all the top players have gone into silence for a month, and then all of a sudden you get an influx of the best list for every faction to date, right? It's like,
And all of a sudden, if we take Thousand Suns, for example, there's like a small handful of people who've taken 10 Terminators in the Thousand
yes,
Suns
yep.
list. But if you look at the singles Thousand Suns list, pretty much everyone is running 10
Really?
Terminators.
Wow.
Oh, yeah, that's just the standard build. But we know from our research that's not necessarily the optimal build at all.
Tyroxor also playing, as I'm sure you've looked at Tyroxor's list, playing 10 Terminators.
Yes, he does have 10 Terminators. So, oh my God, he's gonna get me back for that statement. What have I put out into the
He's
world?
played a lot of Thousand Suns, mate. That's awesome. Did you want to run me through what you're bringing, I guess, Vic? You
Yeah,
are
I mean,
playing the Thousand Suns.
I've got the Thousand Suns, and I'm super happy to be on the Thousand Suns because I think they're potentially the most fun army to play in 10th edition at the moment.
I also remember when you and I were playing them in 9th edition too, right? Like having a blast as well. They also look super sweet, and your Thousand Suns are also painted really well. So, like, winning on all fronts there, really, aren't you?
Yeah, and now obviously I can actually put Magnus on the table, so it's brilliant. So, yeah, I've got a Thousand Suns list that has come off the back of some advantages for me because I have picked up on some tech pieces that other people haven't. The only person who has kind of gone on a similar kind of vein to me is Arne from Team Germany. And I was really amazed because we don't talk. We haven't talked about any of this, but we've come to similar ideas built around a few units which aren't popular at the moment in the singles meta, like the Exalted Sorcerer on Disc. A lot of people are playing, the Infernal Masters, but we both have 3 Infernal Masters in our Rubric squads. Rather than spamming the Sorcerers, we spam the Infernal Masters for more output efficiency. And for having more Cabal points to make more of those plays. And there are a lot of things which, design decisions which are very different from the group of people who went to the Pyro Cup. And I'm kind of happy and excited about that as well.
I remember when 10th edition first dropped, we were playing like some very early games, right? And we were playing Deathwatch vs. Thousand Suns, I think we played. And for me, I was kind of really unsure about Magnus or no Magnus, but it seems like everyone has landed on Camp Magnus, right?
Yeah, I think, pretty much everyone is on, except Australia. I think they have no Magnus. They're the only top team who doesn't have Magnus for some reason. And they have 10 Terminators. I don't know what's going on there, but I don't want to underestimate. But otherwise, everyone's got Magnus. And I
they're
think,
playing the triple Mutalithic Vortex Beast.
Yeah, as an output option, I think Magnus is the key output of this entire list. So yeah, in my take and the way I'm playing it, but I think Thousand Suns is one of those armies where so much of the tech is hidden behind face value almost. Like you look at it and you're like, oh, you put all of these strats into the Terminators and they shoot something and that thing dies.
I don't like it.
But But yeah, the value is so much more on little tech pieces like the Rhino,
Hmm.
or the little tricks you can do with the Vortex Beast, or the movement shenanigans you can do with the Exalted Sorcerer or
Yep.
Magnus. So I think it's going to be awesome to see some Thousand Suns play on the WTC
I
streams. And I think it's going to open up people to a lot of different tech that they haven't realized can be
I'm
done.
going to claim this, but who was right in terms of the number of Mutilith Vortex beasts in the end? Because I remember you and I were debating this, right? I, I
I'm, I mean, I had no idea what I was doing at the start because I went straight in with like no Magnus, no Terminators, three Mutilid Vortex
this is a
Beasts.
long, this
I
is a
mean, I
long
think I ran
time
two against you.
ago. Yeah,
I think you could probably get away with
yeah,
two. You could also get away with
yeah.
zero, and I really like having
One's
one.
nice. You get the special ability if you've got one, two, or three, right? That's how that
Mm-hmm.
thing works. That's great. Yeah, I'm playing the old Death Watch.
Mm-hmm.
Super fun faction. I'm playing Eldari for singles, the single Wraith Knight, the 20 Wraith Guard build. But for teams, yeah, playing Deathwatch. And had a great time working with Chris Radford, who is playing the lead Super Major at the same time. We'll be playing WTC from our team, and yeah, he kind of sold me on some ideas into the go there. And originally I was like, I had spoken with some other Deathwatch players or Marines players who are at the WTC. I was kind of like, hey, what are you feeling? Do you want to collaborate and see where we're at? And they were kind of quite far away from where I was. They had a lot of tech. They had, I think Deathwatch is, you know, well, Deathwatch is the best faction to beat Gene Stealer Cult. I think that's not even a secret, right? You can 20-0 Gene Stealer Cult if they make a mistake, like in one turn,
Mm-hmm.
and lock them out of the game hard. And a lot of people had gone into a lot of tech of playing Gene Stealer Cult. They've got like the Phobos Librarian, they've got 3 units of Inceptors and stuff like that, um, and then the infiltrator guy, and then maybe the librarian and stuff, or rapid ingressing and stuff. And for me, I was kind of like, what is the bare minimum I can play to get like an 18-2 on Gene Steel Cole, and then after that, just have like the best all round matchup, which also kind of speaks volumes to my role in the team as well as like as an all rounder. And yeah, that's why I went with playing 35 Deathwatch veterans. I was originally at 50 big ones, and then I got a captain, watchmaster. I got a unit of 3 inceptors, 2 units of 5 infiltrators, the 1 speeder, and then I've got something which I've just been having a blast with, the Proteus kill team, which Chris Radford and I were discussing and testing out. We had a mirror match game right before the submission, and I just love them. It's just it's so great that you get to play Proteus kill teams because I've wanted to play them for so long as well. I've actually had the entire kill team unassembled in my room,
Nice.
so
Awesome.
I was really happy to be like, oh yes, finally they're good. So that's such a fun unit. You get advance and charge, and on these pretty dense boards, like it's like the melee output of them is like surprisingly relevant. And you got the biker there who can move 14 plus advance and charge. So you're not just playing with slow terminators and veterans for the most part. So I love it. Deathwatch has been really, really awesome. I got 10 Desolators, of course. Been really super fun. Like, you got so much shooting as well, man. Like, oh boy. Frag cannons just, they look at anything that doesn't have the Imperium or Chaos keyword, and they're just like, great. Let's go.
Good thing Eldar and GSC fall into that category.
Yes, for sure, yeah. Even if you've got Wraithguard, -1 to wound, you've actually just got anti-infantry 2+, so you can shred Wraithguard for a living, actually. You just pop the strat, anti-infantry 2+, 4 rolls to hit and wound, exploding 6s, boom, ignore cover, AP2, almost pick up a whole squad, really. Great fun. I've been loving them. But was there any... I did want to touch on one thing. I feel like one interesting part of the pods, one thing that struck out to me, as you're probably going to know where I'm going with this, is Team Spain, who, after my discussion with a lot of people argued that Team Spain is arguably a Seed 1 team. By the way, I'm completely profess my ignorance and everything like that, right? But a lot of people were like, Team Spain are really, really, really good, and they have a country that plays a lot of team games and a lot of huge single tournaments that we don't really know about. So are you kind of, I'm just going to assume if I was teaming a captain, I would only be preparing to beat Team Spain in my pod, but are you kind of worried about that? Because they've got some really weird lists too, right? And I don't know. I feel like that's maybe if there's going to be one upset. I don't want to make you feel bad, but if there's going to be one upset in the pod stages, it feels like it could be Spain versus England, right?
Well, I mean, I think a lot of people would hope for that as well. But I think in our pod we have obviously Spain and
Mhm.
Bulgaria. And the interesting thing about Bulgaria is that you look at their lists and they're like your team's
Yep.
lists, where you look at every list and you're like, yeah, that looks strong, that looks strong, that looks
Mhm.
strong. And then you look at Team Spain's list and you look through them and like, I don't understand.
Yeah.
Like, why have they done this? Why have they done that? Why, like, surely that's not the optimal
Like,
play.
when's the last time you played into 5 Greater Demons, Vic?
There's some weird stuff in there in the Spain list. So I'm really I'm kind of worried about it, to be
Hmm.
honest, because I think we're also playing them in a very interesting mission
Yes. Yeah, this mission is
here.
super brutal as well, I feel.
So yeah, we'll see how it goes. I think we can't underestimate it, but I think if you put our lineups against each other, I would say that the majority of people would say we have the stronger list
Yep.
lineup. But whether or not that translates into how it actually plays out on the
Yeah.
board, because you're right. The scary thing is, what are we
Yeah.
missing in this?
Yeah.
And if we are, could that tilt
And
everything on our
if
scores?
I'm arguing for Spain here, which I don't really care
Mm.
either way. If I'm arguing for Spain and I look at their list and I'm like, what's the one mission maybe I'd want to play? It's probably the mission where you don't have to hold your home objective and you brawl in the middle, right? Like you got you got blood angels, full graded demons,
Orcs.
orcs, custodes. Like,
Yeah,
I mean,
it's worked out nicely for them. So we'll see how it kind of pans out for us. But fingers
I'm
crossed.
sure they would have maybe wanted an easier, well, if there is an easier seed one team as well, right? But yeah, that's a spicy one. I feel.
Yeah. Oh, it's going to be really exciting, and I'm really excited to meet the Spanish guys.
Yeah,
Think hopefully share some ideas. I know they are like I've heard of a couple of the players there, but a lot of them I haven't
yeah.
heard of.
I've got a
So
question.
yeah.
Last question before we wrap it off, because we're
Mm.
running OT.
Yeah,
What
sure.
is the one team of players that you really want to meet in person?
One team.
If you could
I
only go,
really,
here's a better question. If you could only go to play
yeah.
WTC against one team, and it doesn't matter if you win or lose, what team would you want to play against?
Oh, it's a really interesting one. There's so many good options. Um, I think I really want to. Oh my God, because I'm trying to decide between Canada, Australia, and Sweden.
Okay. Yep.
Because like I know, like I don't know anyone in Australia. I would love to get to know them, especially
Yep.
Liam.
For sure.
Canada, they're all so
Mhm.
nice, and Ridvan's awesome, and I've played against Chris
Mhm.
before. And Sweden, Jonathan's like is a legend, and I've had phone calls with him in the past about sisters,
Yeah.
etc. So I'd love to get to know them more. Oh my God, there's so many. And then the Denmark captain like messaged me, and we were chatting a bit,
Nice.
and he seemed like a cool guy. So I don't know, man. One team, I would love to be. And if I'm only going to play one game, one
Yep.
round against one
That's all you
team,
got. But you can meet everyone.
I I would like to play that round against Australia. I
Australia?
think.
That's a good answer.
Yeah,
Australia's pretty top tier in terms of like who you'd want to play against. I think
definitely. I think it would just be such a good laugh, and I'd learn a lot about a completely different way of playing the game.
yeah, yeah. I think there's a lot of learning opportunities, and Australia do combine. They have I think the most optimal balance of sportsmanship and power, right?
Yeah.
Which is
As long as I don't get paired into Brody, like that would be a disaster. Just to like, oh my God, Brody, how many times have we played now? Here we go.
Wait, I'm going to look at what is Matt Solly playing. Matt Solly's playing Chaos
He's
Knights. All right, Matt Solly.
chaos
If you listen to
nice.
this, I'm happy to play round one because I would love to get a game against Solly. And I'm never going to play against Brody or Liam anyway, just because of our team makeup. So
Yeah.
I'll lay down the gauntlet here. We'll see how it goes.
What about you, Dave? What's your pick?
Man,
Team England, yeah? Could you
I think I've
imagine?
beaten all you guys before, right? Who have I lost against
Yeah,
in
pretty
Team England?
much. Anyone? No one?
Actually, Mike Porter I've lost against. Yeah, and we're 1-1 actually, Mike Porter and I. And I haven't played Harrison. I would love to play against Team Belgium, I think. Because I'm not going to copy your answer, because I've already said, like, we already get to play Australia, so I'm already going to do that. But I would love to play against Liam, and then I would maybe love to get the Deathwatch Mirror against Guillaume. I mean, geez, they're in our pod as well, I just realized. Or I would love to get my revenge on Alexander Seiko beating me at the LGT, but I mean, he's just going to jam me anyway, so just I think Belgium would be top tier as well. Really nice bunch of guys, and I'm sure they'd be happy to get beers afterwards as well.
Definitely.
I think France would be really interesting as well. Like, I don't know almost anyone that plays on France.
Oh, I really want to play against Germany.
Yeah,
that's one.
Germany's
I
great
just
as well,
have a feeling they are absolute monsters at the game.
Yeah, I think Germany is top tier as well. I think. Yeah, that's a good one.
I've reached the stage in my 40k time where I just want to play against like people who are really, really good at the game and be like, oh, that's what you're meant to do.
You're kind of like, you just want to become the fisher. Have you ever seen that show? It's like River Hunters or something. It's like this fisherman guy who just tries to fish the largest freshwater fish or something. It's just like, that's all you want to do now. It's like,
it's the only time I'll feel anything,
You've been there and done that, and all you want to do is just find the biggest river monsters there are. You got to get down to the outback in Australia, mate. Oh dear! It's been great catching up. I can't wait for we've been talking a lot about WTC as well, and the team tournament environment, but a part of me is also kind of disliked, on a personal level, the fact that our team hasn't really been able to function, so to speak, right? Probably because I'm in one of the less active teams. So, like, you guys are all busy and have your team ecosphere, but I'm a little bit detached from my team in a certain extent, right? So, a part of me also can't wait for, regularity, so to speak, and we can get back to doing what, I don't know, what we do best, I guess, for lack of better words, right? This, I guess that's,
it's going to be exciting to grow Team Ignite after this, I think. I think that's going to be something that we can all look forward to.
I mean, how good are we going to be at teams after this, man?
Oh my God, unstoppable.
Man.
We've jinxed
Watch
it
out,
now.
England going to have to, and we know all the England secrets, so we know exactly how they're going to prepare for the next team tournament.
Insider information.
That's the gauntlet. I think UKTC has just announced its next team tournament as well at February. There we go. Episode, what is this, 33?
33, the double threes.
Oh, it's been good. I've been loving it.
Yes.
I'm going to go make some dinner. Make a risotto. What are you up
to? Dinner too for me. Got some leftovers.
Nothing beats leftovers, though. Let's be honest.
Well, I hope you guys have all enjoyed listening to this. Maybe a little bit rambly, hopefully a little bit interesting. And, next time we'll see you again for probably a little bit more WTC stuff before we go back to the singles stuff.
There we go. If you have any ideas about things maybe we should do intra WTC, I might have some time to do some. So maybe if you write down in the comments, get someone on the podcast, I will take my phone around and record some stuff and try and get some people on. So if there's a player you want to ask a question or something, leave it down in the comments, or if you want me to go and stir a bit of banter somewhere, I'll probably have the time to do it. So maybe leave a comment down there. Even if it's a friend you want to poke some fun at, I'll try to get them on, and maybe we'll do like some segments. I might collect everything and we'll do a post-mortem or something.
Thank you for listening to the 40k Fireside podcast. Vic and I hope you've enjoyed listening, and we greatly appreciate any feedback that you can provide after the show.